Yeah. Sorry, I'm recording right now. So Ariane, just cut out this first little bit. So I started my website is the Veteran Professional. And so it's kind of very career oriented stuff for like if you're interested in entrepreneurship, higher ed, and professional careers, there's like the three buckets. But in doing the podcast, I wanted to open up to, bring some people from nonprofits on. I wanted to talk about mental health issues, talk about other things that are adjacent to the veteran community, but aren't necessarily directly, career oriented. And so I added the semi in there in order to kind of like open up that world.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Okay, the red light is on and we are recording. This is Mark back for another episode of the Veteran Semi-Professional. So today's an interview episode where I'm interviewing a veteran about their life and career after the military. All an effort to help you if you're trying to think about what to do with yourself once you can put your hands back in your pockets, grow your hair, and start wearing these things called quote unquote civilian clothes. This is the show for you to show you what are the options that are out there and how you might go about pursuing different careers and opportunities in your post-military life. So I'm super pumped for today's guest. His name is Mike Steadman, and I remember listening to him on a podcast a couple years ago, and he's been on my wish list for a while. So I'm super pumped to get him on the show. So if you don't know who Mike is, he's the founder and CEO of Ironbound Boxing Education, and is also currently working on Ironbound Media. So he's a graduate of the Naval Academy in the Marine Corps, where he then went into becoming an infantry officer. Trained CEOs and nationally ranked boxers, as well as through Ironbound, providing free amateur boxer training, entrepreneur education, and employment opportunities for Newark youth and young adults. So really a wide-ranging set of interests and things you're involved in here, Mike. Is there anything that I didn't touch on that you want to mention to the audience?
No, that's it. But I do go by Iron Mike these days. Other than
Iron
that,
Mike,
we're good.
excuse me. Love it. We actually, so I did, I was in Fort Bragg for 7 years. That was my home. And Iron Mike is a famous statue at Fort Bragg. It's like this big one of, the World War II paratrooper with his, chin strap undone, leaning forward. And it's a very popular place to go. There's Iron Mike Gym. It's like part of the Fort Bragg culture of Iron Mike. So glad to have an Iron Mike here on the show.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure to be here. Always opportunity. I always enjoy getting to know other veterans in the ecosystem, whether it's podcasting, entrepreneurship, or just transitioning. It's just good people. And I love these opportunities. So thank you for inviting me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike, what did you do in the Marines?
I was an infantry officer with 1st Battalion, 8th Marines out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I like to say North Crack-a-lacky.
Oh man, I love North Carolina. I love North Carolina. Even if I was, at Fort Bragg for 7 years, it's a great state, and I absolutely love it down there. So, Mike, one of the first things I always want to talk about on the show is your personal transition from the Marines. You can kind of go back to where you were in that place and time. What were some bright spots in your transition, and then maybe what were some speed bumps that you might want to point out for other people coming in behind you?
For me, honestly, I had mentally made up the decision that I wanted to transition out. When I entered the Marine Corps, I was full of piss and vinegar, right? I wanted to be an infantry officer, platoon commander. That's all I wanted to do. Then you go on deployment and then you come back and you go on another deployment. And after a while, you're like, man, like, I don't know, sleeping in the mud and the dirt doesn't sound as appealing to me like it did, when I was first getting out, and you start thinking about other things. And I think for me, the other aspect of it was I knew I didn't want the Marine Corps to be my only identity. So I was looking for what I wanted to do out. And I was really passionate about boxing because I had boxed at the Naval Academy, fell in love with the sport, was a 3-time national boxing champion, 2-time most valuable boxer, and captain of my boxing team. And I do remember the decision point of like, I started to talk to people about getting out. My frat brothers were like, you got to go to business school. And if it's not a top 10 business school, it's a waste of time. So make sure you get in top 10. So I remember that pressure. The other side of the house was, I kind of felt like, speaking frankly, as an African-American male, I went to a good college, right? I served my country in the military.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had done everything I was supposed to do, right? Like checking the box of like, hey, this is what you're supposed to do to be successful. And I wanted to coach boxing. And I felt like, well, I had done this checklist of things I was supposed to do. Now let me go out and do what I want to do. And not to say that I didn't want to be an infantry officer, because I did. And when I found out I was an infantry officer, I felt like a number 1 draft pick, right? That's how important it was to me at the time. And that's how it felt to a lot of us that have, going into college, whether it's a service academy, ROTC, or just going through the OCS route or enlisting, whatever, we have these dreams and ambitions of serving our country. And we want these specific MOSs. And to be able to do it, you feel like a professional athlete, the same feeling. And so having experienced that, but I just knew that I wanted to do something else, after getting the experience that I sought, which was going to war and all that other stuff. And so, it was really me drawing that line in the sand and making a decision. And I chose to move to Newark with the intent of pursuing my aspirations of coaching amateur boxing.
There's so many things I appreciate this. I want to touch on just like the sleeping in the mud real quick. That was funny enough. I was having this conversation with my girlfriend the other day. I'm also a former infantry officer, and 5 years ago, man, I could have my full uniform on, have a full day out, and like jump out of an airplane, ruck a couple miles, lay down, put my head in the back of my rucksack, and fall right asleep. And now I'm like, oh, I need my wind down time. I got to have my sleepy time tea. Got to put the blue noise machine on. It's a different world. But I absolutely appreciated that time in the dirt and mud, and made me. I know it made me a better person for sure. So
Yeah,
what was it
for sure? Absolutely.
What was it about Newark? Are you from Newark, or like was there a draw to going to there?
Now, I'm not from Newark, but when I was at the Naval Academy, I had an opportunity to intern at an all boys school here for young men of color called St. Benedict's Prep. And I just really had a close bond with the school. I interned here twice over the summer. And so when I was looking to transition out, I felt like I could start a boxing program at St. Benedict's. And so that's one of the regional reasons that I came here. And then in addition, the proximity to New York City. New York City has a strong boxing culture. Inner city boxing is like really the mecca of boxing, any inner city in this country. And so I was thinking New York, I trained here when I was in college. It's one of the reasons I credit a lot of my boxing success was my time sparring in inner city boxing gyms. And so I figured I could come to Newark, build a gym or boxing program at St. Benedict's, have access to New York City, maybe go to Columbia or one of these other schools for graduate school, and really just start to carve out my own niche as the amateur boxing coach.
What is it about the inner city boxing scene, excuse me, that you think makes it different?
It's just real boxing. Like
Yeah.
you see all these, nothing against Rumble and, all these boutique boxing fitness studios, whatever. But listen, boxing is a poor man's sport. And if you want to see real box, you got to go where the people are. And when you go into the inner city, it's grimy, right? It's street, it's gritty, but there's such amazing talent coming out of these gyms. There's amazing kids in these communities. And to be quite frank, as a black infantry officer, I felt like a tree that was in the woods. And, if a tree falls that's in the woods and nobody hears it, does it make a sound? And a lot of times that's how I felt, right? Like, you go to the Naval Academy, you're the successful African American male, and people want to put you on a pedestal. But what does it matter if you're not around your community? If you're not around, people that look like you that can benefit from your story and your perspective on life. And so for me, it was like, I want to be around more black and brown people. I want to share the knowledge and insight I've learned at the Naval Academy, being a Marine, all the leadership and all that kind of stuff. And so I felt like coming to an inner city was a great opportunity to do that.
I'm reflecting back on those like quote unquote, prison gyms that we had overseas, right? Where it's like an open courtyard and you got this like mixed match of weights and like, some like random kettlebells and just like a bunch of like rusty iron plates and everything. And man, that's where I was always like the most fit. And it's not the air conditioned, well padded gym where, there's fresh towels and, lavender scent spreading throughout. It's the place where people are just going to grind. People are just going to just get after it. And all like the excess trappings and bullshit that are around there are stripped away. And it's just, we're just here to work. And that's really all we're here to do.
Absolutely. I still think about the gym in Afghanistan, late at night, under the moonlight, going out there to get that work, right? Boots and utes, you
Yeah.
never really got workout clothes. You got boots and camis. And yeah, those are some of the best places to train. And it's no different with an inner city gym, right? You don't need a lot of the fancy stuff. It's really the people. And the people are there to work. The coaches are invested. The kids want to be there. So it's this great atmosphere. And they're really diamonds in the rough in all these inner cities across the country. And I'm just thankful I've had an opportunity to, be a part of the Newark boxing scene, create a space for kids, and serve my community at the same time.
What was it like to get started? Because I mean, obviously, you've got a lot of experience boxing. You had a great career at the Naval Academy yourself boxing, but you can't necessarily just show up on the side of the street and hang up a sign that says Iron Mike's Boxing Gym. So like, what was it like? What was the process of getting this going, and then getting kids to come and commit to the program?
Yeah, I mean, for me, right, because of my Marine background, right, I've always been coaching boxing. So from the time I left the Naval Academy until I got out, I had always been coaching boxing. When I was on deployment, I took my mitts and I was always holding gloves for Marines or something. And then when I went to Japan, same thing, right? So I've coached on dirt, literally. So it was no biggie for me. So when I got to Newark, I took a job at St. Benedict's running the residence hall. I lived in a giant residence hall of 70 teenage boys. Didn't know what job I was going to take. I literally left Camp Lejeune in a U-Haul, drove up to St. Benedict's. Father Ed was like, we'll figure it out. He's the headmaster at St. Benedict's. And then after a few weeks, they're like, yeah, you're going to be in charge of the residence hall, which was awkward because they already had somebody in charge of it. So, yeah, that's what comes with it. But I just started grabbing kids and started training them boxing. I would take them to the gym. And one of the reasons I went to St. Benedict's, it reminded me a lot of the Naval Academy, just this kind of come and make your own oasis, figure it out, message to Garcia. And I came, start finding some kids and start taking them to a local boxing gym, start paying out of pocket, and realize that probably wasn't a good business model because a lot of kids, they may or may not stick with the sport, so you want something a little bit more self-sustaining. And so I started training kids in my residence hall. I trained them out front. I trained them in the gym, in the hall. We would push the tables and chairs out the way. And then the city of Newark opened up a boxing gym on another side of town that was free to the community. And so I started taking my kids there to commute and train. And once we were there, though, I just saw a lot of kids that were outside of St. Benedict's training as well. And sometimes they didn't have a coach, right? I'm very disciplined. I got my kids, got uniforms, whatever. A lot of these kids didn't necessarily have that. And so I will pull them into our ecosystem, start training with us. And one of the things that prompted me to do a gym in the first place, another gym, was the commute, because this was on another side of town. To be quite frank, it was a rough side of town, and I would have to drive kids in my car, and that's limited my capacity.
Right.
So I ended up approaching the city of Newark because I had a relationship with one of the managers in recreation, because he would offer a van to drive me and the kids from St. Benedict's to this gym. But a lot of times, I'd be standing out on a corner and the van wouldn't show up. So I was like, all right, there's got to be a better way. So I
Yeah.
approached him about opening a gym in some other part of the city, got the thumbs up, I said, it's not going to cost you anything. I just need an empty space. We can outfit ourselves, whatever. Took me back to the back of a leaky rec center in the Ironbound section of Newark and said, does this work? I said, yep. And then I became an entrepreneur. So that's what planted the seed for what became the Ironbound Boxing Academy.
Super cool, man. Super cool. Yeah, one of the things I'm kind of curious about during this period, you mentioned, prior to getting out of the Marines and thinking about, what you wanted to do after the military, of, the other people around you were like, okay, you got to go out, you got to go to a top 10 MBA school, and you got to do this. And like, this is the path that you must follow. How were you navigating? Like, were you feeling the pressure of, I don't know if I made the right decision, or like, were you feeling some bit of like, man, I wanted to do something else, or is this the right thing? Like, kind of talk me through the emotional things that you were, if anything, you were grappling with in this period.
So I'll tell you, there was a moment when I first got to St. Benedict's, they didn't have a room ready for me. So in the residence hall, right, they're still working out the situation with the other guy who was running the residence hall, right? So I didn't actually have an apartment or anything. And the residence hall, they have these really nice apartments, etc.
Right.
So they put me in these like monastery rooms. So it was literally like two beds, no TV, no nothing. It was like a barracks room, right?
Right.
And I'm sitting there, I got my bags and stuff, and I never forget. I remember looking out the window, being like, did I make the right decision? Like, did I really not just punt my life? Because it sounds all good, following your dreams and all this other
Right.
stuff.
Right.
But now you're here, and there's no turning back. You've committed to moving to Newark, right? You're out of the military. And I just remember looking out my window, just being like, I hope I made the right decision. But one of the things I've learned is that, I'm a quick start, right? So Colby, it's a assessment, right? And a quick start. It's like I come up with an idea. Next thing you know, I got a website launched and everything's off to the races.
Yeah.
But for
Yeah.
me, what I found is trust my instinct and trust my gut. And I'll tell you, I consider myself a Ronin. I literally have a giant Ronin samurai on my back, samurai without a master. So when everyone goes left, I tend to go right. And I've also found that there's a lot of opportunity by going the opposite direction. So the obvious move to make, just like in chess, means it's wide open. That means everybody can see it. The not so obvious move, less open. There's more opportunity. And so I knew that me being an African American, Naval Academy grad, moving to a place like Newark, I just was confident I could figure it out. And I made that risk, and it's paid off for me because I was at a recent class reunion, and at a certain point, man, everybody's kind of like congested. Everybody's working at Amazon, McKinsey. You can tear it up, right?
Right.
Amazon,
Right.
McKinsey, JP Morgan, whatever. And really, people are more interested in what you do.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
because it's just
100%,
off
man.
the beaten path. And
Yeah.
so I'm just very proud that I took the opportunity to go off the unbeaten path. And I'm still learning and I'm growing, but it's really exciting. It's been a great journey.
One of the things I talk about a lot on this show is the concept of learning to paddle your own canoe. Of the waters are rough and life is not an easy thing. And there's gonna be lots of people who are going to tell you, especially, when you're getting out of the military, you have to go do XYZ. You have to go follow this path. And especially, I've especially seen it in academy grads of like, this is the prescribed route that you have to take. You have to go to the academy. You have to go be, combat arms infantry officer. You have to go to this business school. You have to go work at McKinsey. And so many people I've talked to who've like followed that path, then realize after a couple of years of, okay, that was the one that was laid out in front of me, but I kind of feel like I want to go do something else.
Yeah, there's still a whole lot of life left.
Yeah.
So I think, and I was thinking about this at my reunion, right? When you're at a place like the Naval Academy, or you're in college in general, or hell, you're even in the just military, whatever, there's this feeling in certain environments that you're already successful,
Yeah.
that you already made it. And I'll be honest, like when you're a young man, especially a color at the Naval Academy, people are like, you made it,
Yeah.
you're escaped, whatever.
Yeah.
But then, it's like you got to go serve in the military. That's a whole thing, and then, you get out of the military. And so it's like you had all this potential before, but now you got to actually go out and execute it. And I have this theory that, I think some people might keep chasing that high, that like you're successful, but at a certain point, you got to go prove it. You got to go carve out your niche,
Yeah.
And there are guys that are like freaking PhDs in economics going to Stanford, and they feel like they're the stupidest one in the class, So it's
Yeah.
like podcasting. There's always someone pushing the envelope, And I've seen people before they go to the elite business schools and do all the pedigree stuff, and after. And it's like night and day, It's like hype, hype, hype. I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna get this, I'm gonna get this. Then at a certain point, you're there, and like everyone goes to a great business school. Everyone has this great pedigree. Now what? How are you gonna be the 1% in your field? How are you gonna stand out from the crowd? And I think as we start to get older, right, and you're on the other side of these things, then you start to say, man, there's still a lot of life left to live. Do I want to spend the rest of my time working 80 hours a week? Do I I have a family now. I have all these other things. Can I take as much risk as I could have when I was younger? And so, what ends up happening is people start looking at guys like me and guys like my peers that are entrepreneurs or took the unbeaten path, and they're curious about, okay, how were you able to do this? What is your thought process, whatever? And that was the biggest thing I took away from going to reunions, just how many people are watching us. Like you never think, like I had classmates I might have never talked to at all. And they're like, I listen to every one of your podcasts. And I was just like so honored by it,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's cool to see that, like, I guess my message has kind of resonated with a lot of people. And my whole message is just create more economic opportunities for Black and brown people using boxing, using entrepreneurship, using my platforms. And, people are following the journey. So it's super, super dope.
What is it about boxing, do you think, in particular? So like, I'm very kind of curious that, the city of Newark had opened up a gym for kids to go boxing in. Cause from someone who honestly knows really nothing about boxing, I've seen Rocky a couple of times,
Yeah.
so that's the extent of my knowledge here. Especially from like a city's perspective, I would view that as like, oh man, this is like a really risky thing. It's like we're gonna bring kids in, have them like beat the crap out of each other. Why don't we just have them play basketball or something? So like, what is it about boxing? Do you think that the city was like, we want to invest in this, and like, yes, we're gonna give you some gym space so we can bring kids in and teach them boxing.
Man, Newark has a lot of issues with young men and women of color, if I'm just being quite frank, right?
Yeah, please.
There's not enough basketball teams and sports teams or whatever. Kids need programs, right? They need an opportunity to extend the classroom beyond what we traditionally think, right?
Right.
40% of our population lives below the poverty line, right? A lot of them can't afford high quality recreation. They can't afford $200 a month CrossFit gyms. I don't care how much it changes their lives, right? So there's a lot of challenges in these kind of environments. So I think one of the things is, when you think of entrepreneurship, there's this market pull, right? Of like, hey, what do people actually want? Like, what is their demand for, right? You can come to Newark and you can set up a coding boot camp and you can set up all these other things, right? And although they're great programs, is there really a demand for them?
Right.
Does the community have agency with these programs? No. So you have to do all this thing about building awareness for it. Boxing, they want boxing. You don't got to build awareness for it. It sells itself. And I think deep down, a lot of people feel like underdogs, and there's just something about the idea that a heavy bag in the back of a leaky gym in Louisville, Kentucky can create Muhammad Ali,
Yeah.
and just the idea. And it's so simple. It's so basic, right? This idea of, I think it's like the American dream, really.
100%.
Hard work, grit, hustle, putting it on the line, stepping inside the ring. We always talk about going to war, blood, sweat, and tears, all that kind of stuff. Well, inside a boxing ring, that's not just talk, that's reality. And I think it's a manifestation of the American dream.
I really love that comparison. Like when I'm thinking about, who and what a boxer is. I mean, in a lot of ways, you're an athletic entrepreneur. Like you're working on your own. You're going into you have a team around you for sure. But like when you're entering into that ring, it's just you. It's just you and another person. And it's how hard are you going to work leading up to that point? How much preparation are you going to do? And then what is going to be your grit and determination, both pre the ring and then also inside the ring in order to, leave with a W.
I'll tell you what else I've been thinking about lately, right? So I'm in the entrepreneur space, right? I
Right.
got out the military with the intent of becoming an amateur boxing coach. Now I'm an entrepreneur, right? And I enjoy it. I love entrepreneurship just like I love boxing. But even I'm guilty of the comparison trap at times. I built this amazing organization, Ironbound Boxing, got a really dope gym, nationally recognized, got amazing kids, whatever. And I'll still be thinking like, I'll come across somebody that like raised a venture fund or something. And I'm like, damn it, man, that's so dope. I would
Yeah.
love to like have a venture capital fund. I can invest in other Black founders and veterans, etc. But I won't even recognize the fact of like, man, I'll be at a boxing show and I'm working the corner, of one of my kids. How many people in the entire world feel confident stepping into the ring, working the corner of a kid and coaching him to victory? And I do it like it's nothing. You get
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
part of one of the things I got to be aware of is like keeping boxing as my anchor, because you can fall in the comparison trap. And this is for our listeners too. But like we all bring our own set of uniqueness, and the reality of it is like, yeah, you might be able to do better financial models than me, or you might be able to raise this fund. But guess what? Toe to toe, can't touch me in the ring. Coaching, can't touch me in the ring, And there's something about like carving out your own niche of like expertise to where you're like a category of one, and
Yeah.
not necessarily like trying to compete with other people. And so if you're a veteran and people think of boxing, they're like, oh, you got to talk to Iron Mike. You got to talk to Ironbound Boxing. Like it's synonymous. So part of me taking the opportunity to appreciate what I've already built and appreciating and standing and owning the space of being an amateur boxing coach.
I love that, man. One, I think there's huge like life satisfaction and fulfillment that you can get out of carving that niche for yourself and whatever it is, and saying, this is me, and like this is what I've created, and like this is the impact that I've made. And like, yeah, there's a million different other things that you can do to also, kind of get that feeling. But whatever one that like you've made for yourself is probably going to be the one that's going to be like the most fulfilling. You're going to get the most out of. So I really love the mentality.
And I'll tell you, man, I never forget the first time someone saluted me. You know, I think it was like
Right.
coming through the Naval Academy, right? They like pop to attention. You're driving on the yard, and
Right.
you're like, they're like, "Good morning, sir," and you're just like, it's so crazy, right? Now you're the sir. Nothing touches the first time somebody called me coach.
Yeah.
Because then when they called me coach, I'm like, who are you talking to? You know, I
Yeah.
came from the time when I had like two coaches in my life. Coach Jones, which is my high school basketball coach, and Coach McNally, my college boxing coach, right? And I know the place they hold in my life.
Yeah.
So for these kids to call you coach, and it's
So,
earned,
yeah.
not given. I never was like, hey, my name is Coach Mike, whatever. You start teaching people, and then they're like, hey, coach, what about this? And it's like,
Yeah.
damn, you know? And I have to remind myself of that. But coaching is not a given, right? That's like you got to earn that title, and there's something special about it. And it hit me more when a kid called me coach than it did when somebody called me sir as a Marine officer.
I totally feel that. I strongly encourage anyone, if you get the opportunity to coach, especially kids sports at some point, man, hop on that any chance you get. I got to coach a lacrosse team a couple years ago, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Totally loved it. And like, yeah, I remember that also that first time a kid was like, "Hey, coach," and I was like, "Oh shoot, he's talking to me," and it feels awesome. And then having like kids come up to you afterwards and say how much fun they had, and like parents coming up to you and saying like you know really appreciate what you've done, it's huge. So if you can find a way to do that at some point in your life, absolutely encourage you because it is extremely rewarding and honestly just a shit ton of fun too. So I know you all do more than just strictly coaching boxing. Can you talk a little bit about like the other kind of programs that Ironbound Boxing has?
Yeah. So for me, right, my goal was never to create professional boxers, right? That's a byproduct. If it happens, it happens. I'll support you either way. But I've always wanted to use boxing as a capacity building tool. There's just not a lot of money in boxing professionally. And
Yeah,
when I look at a lot of professional boxers, their lives just haven't turned into too much outside of the ring.
right.
You know, it's almost like the ring is like the highlight of their lives. And I don't necessarily believe that, right? So going to a service academy, the beauty of it is we get this amazing boxing experience for 4 years, and then we graduate and we serve as officers in the Marines or other branches of the military, and then get out and start businesses, work in corporate America, etc. Right? A lot of inner city boxers, their option is either turn pro or go to the streets.
Yeah,
That's just the reality of these neighborhoods and these communities. And I think that's a broken system. And, most boxing coaches, right, are all volunteers, amateur boxing coaches. Maybe you have a for-profit business where you're training, you're paying Peter, you're stealing from Peter to pay Paul. So you're
right.
like training corporate fitness or whatever. You're training moms, keeping them in shape so you can cover your amateur boxing program or whatever. But there's no real, not like college football or all these other spaces, right? Boxing is a club sport in college. So I always wanted to help kids become champions in and out of the ring. And the pandemic presented an opportunity for us to create a program around that, because before it was all mentorship. We mentor you, it's more than boxing, blah, blah, blah. But during the pandemic, our gym was closed down. There's all this economic devastation going on caused by COVID. I had come up through the Bunker Lab ecosystem, the veteran entrepreneur ecosystem, doing pitch competitions, etc. And I was like, I had always wanted to do a pitch competition for Ironbound boxing. So then I put together this program for a pitch competition. Then I realized, like, hey, we can't just expect these kids to pitch out of nowhere. We need to teach them how to launch a venture. And so I started texting a couple of friends of mine about, hey, I'm thinking about this idea of doing a pitch competition for kids. And I just started getting like positive feedback right away. So it let me know I was on to something. So I ended up launching a program called Thrive, which is teaching youth and young adults how to be entrepreneurs here in the city of Newark. And it's important I say youth and young adults because that's who we serve at Ironbound. There's a lot of great programs for youth, but all of a sudden kids turn 18, 19,
Yeah,
20. They're living in inner city. They're still living at home. They may or may not go to college. And what free recreational programs do they have? It's almost
yeah,
like, hey, we just kind of send them out into the wild. And so I created this program with the intent of teaching them the entrepreneurial skills and entrepreneurial mindset I learned. And since then, we've given out about $15,000 in grant money to young entrepreneurs of color. We do micro grants between $500 and $2,000 based on their need. They submit a one-page business plan, a one-page financial plan, and a personal essay. And in addition to that, we have an Ironbound scholarship where we give a scholarship to a boxer in the city of Newark to go to college to support their secondary education. We got two boxers now. One, we gave a $5,000 scholarship to go to Rutgers, and another one to go to NJCU. And the funny thing about the NJCU kid, his name is Elvin Alicia. He was homeless, used to live with me. He lived with me for a year after I found out he was homeless, didn't have a place to go. Ended up getting him into St. Benedict's as a senior. He did a post-grad year and then ended up getting a full ride to NJCU as an RA. So really just building out our own little ecosystem here, creating local impact and bridging the gap between boxing, entrepreneurship, and employment.
That's awesome, man. And I'm so glad you brought up that story too. My next question was going to be if you have any success stories of people who've been through the program. And man, that's an awesome one. From homeless to a full ride. That's incredible, man. And it's just huge for me to hear that like you're having that kind of impact on people's lives. That's massive. So I want to like shift the gear a little bit, away from boxing and kind of into veteran entrepreneurship. So you've been very involved in like the veteran entrepreneurial community. Can you talk a bit about some of the the programs and resources that you've found and uncovered and used to like, propel yourself as a vetrepreneur?
Yeah, man, I appreciate you asking that question because honestly, veterans are what stands up Ironbound Boxing and Ironbound Media and just me in general. When I got out of the military, I didn't want anything to do with the military, if I'm being honest. I wanted a new identity. I didn't want to be this campaign cover wearing, combat action ribbon on the back of my truck or the back of my car kind of veteran. I wanted to create a new identity for myself, right?
Because sorry if I interrupt just real quick for everyone who's listening. We're on video right now. Mike is wearing a shirt that says veteran on it too. So that's kind of like the dichotomy of what's going on here. Sorry to interrupt, Mike. Please go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. But and to be quite frank, like again, being an African American infantry officer was very challenging in the Marines, right? It feels like, when you're one of one, a lot of times it feels like you're carrying all the weight and pressure of your entire race. Yeah. So it's not like you're getting viewed as Mike Steadman. It's like you're ruining it for everybody else that comes after you or everyone else before you. So all this pressure and you just stand out. And so I had my challenges being a Black officer, if I'm being frank. So when I got out of the military, I just wanted a fresh start. Well, when I got to the point to where I launched the Ironbound Boxing Academy, right, I became an entrepreneur. Didn't really know what an entrepreneur was, just knew that, hey, here's a space, go figure it out. And by talking to my network, one of my buddies went to a program called Stanford Ignite at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Found out what I was doing with Ironbound, had participated in the program himself, a guy named Luke Finney, and said, hey, I think this will be a great program for you. I'm sending you a recommendation. So ended up applying, got flown out to Stanford for 4 weeks, did basically a 4-week accelerator program with Stanford, learning entrepreneurship, spending time around other veterans. And I was like, you know what? This ain't bad. It's a lot different hanging out with veterans as like a civilian than it was, doing in the military. And I really like that ecosystem. And so I was like, I really want to keep this going. And so while I was at Stanford, I got connected with Bunker Labs because Justine Evers was going through our program and she was big within Bunker Labs. She took us to a bunker brew at the time. And I got connected with Bunker Labs in San Fran. And then they connected me with Bunker Labs, New York City. And that's how I got plugged into the veteran entrepreneurial ecosystem. So pitch competitions, just learning from others. I ended up becoming a veterans in residence, right? End up having an opportunity to be a consultant for WeWork around veteran entrepreneurship. Won a street chairs competition from Mark Rockefeller and the Street Chairs Foundation. He's actually coming to my gym today. So I just got plugged into this veteran ecosystem. And part of being an entrepreneur, we don't talk enough about this, but this concept of an elf business, something that's easy, lucrative, and fun, right? And I heard this from Scott Max from the SABM podcast, who got it from Joe Polish. I think the I Love Marketers podcast, I Love Marketing, whatever. But essentially, like, you know what? You don't have to start a business and be around a bunch of people you don't enjoy, right? yeah, profit might sound great, but I want to enjoy how I spend my time each and every day. And what I have found is I really enjoy being around veteran entrepreneurs. I really enjoy being around the veteran community. They're super supportive, right? A lot of people are still trying to figure their way out, but we still come from the same tribe. And so I've just kind of carved out my niche serving the community in my own way through podcasting and marketing and branding and public speaking, etc., while also raising awareness for Ironbound. And it's very what's the word I'm looking for?
Symbiotic.
Symbiotic relationship,
Yeah.
because veterans support Ironbound. So I support veterans, and
Yeah.
it just worked out really good for me. But I really enjoy the community because, Seth Godin talks about this, right? You don't got to be remarkable to everyone, right? That's a misconception, right? Everybody's trying to go after being remarkable to the whole world. There's enough veteran entrepreneurs that are out here struggling, trying to figure it out, and if I can help them on my platforms, that's a win for me. If I can help them with marketing and branding, and the conversations are like this. So I like the community. I can be myself. I can rock my beard. I don't wear a suit and tie. I'm just me. And I just really enjoy it.
Again, for those of you who aren't watching the video right now, Mike has a fantastic beard. It's awesome. Huge beard goals for anyone trying to figure out, what their beard game is going to look like post-military. Absolutely look up Mike's beard because it's awesome. And I absolutely recognize that support of the veteran entrepreneurial community. And what I've consistently found is like in communicating with other vets as a civilian, when you like enter into a conversation with another vet, like in your civilian life, you don't know everything about them. You don't know everything they're about, but you have like some sense of like their value, some sense of like what they've been through, you probably have some sense of shared experience. And just that little bit can be enough to kind of like open the curtain to each other and be like, okay, you know what, I can really connect with this person. And then, okay, we also maybe have some business interests or some ways that we can work together on something, but I just feel like a little more connected to this human being in the sense that we've been through something that, not a lot of people have. And we've been through that thing at the same period of time. I think it's just a way to connect with someone on another level beyond just, being in the same room and talking to them.
The best way I can describe it is when I graduated the Naval Academy, right? I didn't want to be the Naval Academy Marine officer, right? So I went through the first class in training, right? And so the way it works is, most Academy grads go to the basic school, which is introductory training for Marine officers, right? And they have different slates. Well, I wanted to go through a class where there was less Naval Academy. And then when I got to my unit, there was less Naval Academy there as well, right? And being an officer is kind of competitive, if we're being honest,
Yeah.
right? You get ranked. Somebody's got to be number one. Somebody's got to be at the bottom. It's just the way it is. That's how the military does it. And what I will tell you is it was night and day being in a unit with, non-Naval Academy people versus Academy people. And here's the difference. What I found when Academy people caught up and got to my unit and I had a chance to serve in units with more Naval Academy people, they legitimately don't want you to fail. So even though there's this competition, like, why do I want you to fail? Why would I want to make you look bad? You understand? Yeah. And I found that within the veteran space I feel like it's the same kind of situation, right?
100%.
Like me and you we can both have podcast agencies, right? Dude, why do I want you to fail? If I know that that's a bad client or that's a bad process or whatever, I'm going to let you know if I'm a good person, right? Maybe there are some people that still think in this scarcity mindset, but for me, it's like there's so much opportunity out there to carve our own niche. Rather than competing, I like building, and it's why a lot of my posts I talk about lifting as I climb, and so that's what I have found. I have found this like, there's just less. We're helping each other, people helping people, and a lot of veterans, man, a lot of veterans are struggling transitioning. They're struggling being entrepreneurs, and so just helping people just pays dividends regardless.
Yeah. Since you brought up the podcasting, can you talk a bit about the creation of Ironbound Media and what you're doing with that?
Sure. So what happened was I started a podcast called Confessions of a Native Son back in February of 2020 to express my feelings on race, culture, and business as an African-American, Naval Academy grad, Marine infantry officer, because I just felt like there's not a lot of voices of Black veterans.
Yeah.
I think sometimes these media platforms They get on there and they speak the gospel for veterans. But like, I'm just being honest, right? Like, I have something different to say than Fox News would about race relations in America, especially off the death of Mike Brown and George Floyd. When I'm living in the inner city, right,
Yeah.
I know what it's like to be looked at as a threat. So I have a platform to have these conversations. Well, what ended up happening was when the pandemic hit, right, I was teaching on-site boxing classes to companies in the New York City metro area at that point. And because I had started a for-profit arm of Ironbound Boxing to allow me to leave my job at St. Benedict's Prep. And I was building that up. But when the pandemic hit, it shifted the world, right?
Right. Right.
I saw an opportunity in podcasting around production. You know, a lot of times people think that, oh, you want to make money off your podcast. Well, it's the advertisement, it's this and that, whatever. I looked at that and I was like, that's probably a long road to profitability. You know, I need money like today.
Yeah.
And so I ended up coming up with this idea for Ironbound Media, a podcast production agency. I initially started targeting veterans, not veterans, but accelerators and incubators, because I felt like students were probably tired of sitting in classes on Zoom all day, every day, getting lectures. And I was thinking that these colleges and universities and accelerators, they need to start creating content on audio, you know, so an in-house production studio. So that's what I came up with. But as you know, business is a contact sport. I'm trademarking that, y'all, so stand down. But it really is. And sometimes the market's got to tell you what it wants.
Yeah.
Well, I started getting traction amongst veteran business owners within my network. And, you know, I was on a call. I have a business coach by the name of Bill Watkins from the Lions Pride. And I was on a cohort call, and Bill goes, Mike, who's your perfect customer? And in my mind, my perfect customer would be a 30 to 40-year-old service academy grad that's running his own business, that's entrepreneurial, and wants a podcast. One of the guys on the call unclicks off mute and says, that's me. Let's talk. Wednesday, he signed up. I did a podcast for the CEO of Bunker Labs at the time, Todd Connor. They brought me on to do a podcast for Bunker Labs. And so I was off to the races. And one of the things I've been doing, though, is, you know, I found out I'm pretty good at I'm a humble brag. A lot of veterans do not know how to market and brand themselves. They do not know how to convey their value in this incredibly noisy and online world. And so what I have introduced to the ecosystem is this concept called dog whistle branding to help veteran business leaders channel through the noise by engaging with their perfect customer using branded podcast series. So I'm a podcaster, producer, and brand strategist. And that's what I do. I help veteran business leaders amplify their brands through podcasting and brand strategy.
To go back to the ELF framework, if you were, and I'm also totally stealing that. I love that. You know, you looked at, okay, yeah, I can get advertising on my podcast, but that's not going to be easy. That's going to take me a while. Okay, what's going to be, what's going to be more easy? Just doing the production side. What's also going to be lucrative? Okay, I can start getting paid from this, tomorrow, and then fun. Like you're good at it, and people recognize, like, hey, this is the man for this. So let's reach out to him, and bing, bang, boom, ELF business model, just like that. I love it.
Yeah, and the great part about it is, when I jump on with people, I just try to help people. I'm not trying to sell them or nothing.
Right.
If they need help, hey, I'll make time for you. We jump on, we start talking. And even if I can't help them, I find somebody who can. And again, I don't have to be remarkable to the entire world. Just my group. And my group are veteran business owners that are struggling with their marketing and branding.
Love it. Love it. Well, Mike, we're running down to the last couple of minutes here. So in a minute, I want to pass it back over to you. Just provide any parting shots for a crowd who's trying to figure out, what their post-military life is going to look like. But before I do, there's a question I always ask my guests. And that's, when you think back to your time in the Marines, what was the best and or worst chow hall you ever ate at?
The best and worst chow hall.
Or worse, whichever one comes to mind.
The best chow hall was Mid-Rats in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Because we had been at a patrol base, and then we had got flown to Delram to do ops out of.
Uh-huh.
And I remember going to that chow hall at like midnight, having like nice cold cut sandwiches, ice cream, all this kind of stuff. And it was just great.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
The worst chow hall, I don't even know, really. I think the Army chow hall, right? I had got sent to this Army base in Georgia because we were doing the JLTV training. So basically the military was rolling out a replacement for the Humvees, and they sent our company to run ops against the Army Op 4, so they put
Yeah.
us in these new vehicles and we just went to war with them to figure out if these new vehicles work. But while we were out there doing the training before the op went live, we were eating the Army chow hall, and it was just so different from the Marines. We saw neck tattoos. It just was like,
Right.
are we on base right now? What's
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
on here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that chow hall.
Love that. Love that. Well, Mike, man, this conversation has just flown by. So much good stuff in here, and you're doing some really awesome things. I mean, for your community at large, and then the veteran community and the kids in Newark. It's really cool to talk to you and hear all the awesome things you're doing. So before we close out, I just want to pass it over to you. Just provide any last thoughts to people as they're trying to figure out how to put together and plan for their post-military life.
I want our listeners a couple things. One, I had an opportunity to write the foreword for Todd Connor's book, the CEO of Bunker Labs, former CEO of Bunker Labs, called Third Shift Entrepreneur. So check out that book, because a lot of people can't afford to go into business right away. They launch their businesses on a third shift, after their work and family, usually late at night or early in the morning. And one of the things we talk about in that book is building a portfolio career. So check that out. The other thing I want you to think about is there's a podcast by one of my mentors named Christopher Lockhead, and he talks about having a YOLO, doing your own IPO. He calls it a personal IPO. So look that up. But here's what I'll say. The top 3 public universities available that are free. Number 1 is podcast. Podcasts are free. People ask me all the time, Mike, you're a podcaster. What podcast do you subscribe to? If I'm being honest, I don't really subscribe to any particular podcast. I listen to people I'm interested in emulating.
Yeah.
Right. So Jim Collins I'm a big fan of Jim Collins and his Good to Great series and how he was able to do the work he does, writing about great companies and introducing these strategies. I listen to anything I can on Jim Collins. If I come across somebody interesting, the first thing I do is I look up their podcast, right? And I try to figure out like what interviews they've done, just kind of hear their backstory, learn how to get to where they are. Podcast. Second thing, public libraries, right? Go read a book, open up books, learn, right? You're an adult now. We're out of college, we're out of the military, nobody's telling you what to do. We get to pick the kind of lives we want to live. The human experience is in books at the public library. Go learn the human experience, read about it, learn about entrepreneurship, learn about, life, learn about whatever you want to learn, right? I am a bootstrapped entrepreneur. I got a hustler's MBA, right? My master's is in American studies. I write about race, culture, and business, not race, culture, and gender, not business. I had to self-taught. I was self-taught. So public libraries. And then the last thing is the internet. Amazing resource.
Yeah.
You got YouTube videos. You got blogs, right? You got all the knowledge in the world out there. And when you take ownership of your life and you're intentional, then what you want to do is you want to connect the dots to where you are now, to where you want to be, and what's going to help you get there. And then you start trying to figure out, well, who's walked a similar path? What is the knowledge I need to learn? So if I say I want to be a venture capitalist, then I probably need to learn what is venture capital. I need to learn how to structure and do deals. I need to learn how to coach entrepreneurs, right? There's like a roadmap and you can do it, right? But you got to lay it out. And I think a lot of veterans struggle because there's so much choice. You're like a Lance Corporal. I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah.
Well, public podcasts, public universities, and the internet. And if I had to choose one, I love podcasting, right?
Agreed.
It's like, I'm a marketing guy, okay? Branding, podcasting. To be able to listen in conversations of people at the top of their field, just bullshitting with one another, talking about when they did this IPO deal or when they invested in this company or when they did that, right? 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you had to pay for access to that kind of stuff. Yeah. I had to join some association and fly out to some conference, and then you get to hear them speak on stage. Now they're inviting you in their home. They're inviting you in that boardroom. And so when you take ownership of your education and look at the world as like an endless classroom, then that's where the real magic happens, because you can explore your curiosity, you have the assets to explore it, and you can grow in any way you want. I didn't know podcasting. I had to teach myself podcasting. I'm always taking online courses, these little short 30-day courses or brand strategy sprints, etc. So being intentional and putting yourself out there and taking advantage of these opportunities using the top 3 free public universities, podcasts, libraries, and the internet.
Man, awesome words and some great advice there. Well, Iron Mike, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Last thing, where can people find out more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, you can learn more about me by visiting my website, ironboundboxing.org. That's our nonprofit. Ironboundmedia.com is our for-profit. But just add me on LinkedIn at Iron Mike Steadman. Yes, there's iron in it. And Instagram. And I tell people, if y'all lived in Newark, New Jersey in the middle of a global pandemic, you would be iron too. But in all seriousness, if you're interested in entrepreneurship, I host a great podcast called The Transition for Barker Labs, where we get vulnerable and we take off our armor and we share the truth of what it takes to launch a venture. All right. So check that out. And if you have any questions about your own entrepreneurial journey, feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Yeah, and Mike is super approachable for everyone out there. And all these awesome links and books and everything we've talked about will be in the show notes for everyone. Well, Iron Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This has been a fantastic conversation. So much good stuff in here, and super pumped to see where you're going in the future and continue to see the huge impact that you're having in our community. So thanks for coming on. Appreciate your time and enjoy your afternoon. All right.
Awesome.
All right. Take care, man.